Welcome to Pondering Passages. I'm Curt Austin. My friend David Mullins is going to join us shortly, and we're going to talk about this week Psalm 129. Have you ever read a passage in the Bible and you think, what is this talking about? Why is this here? And more importantly, what does it have to do with me? I think this is a good passage this week for us to talk about that. It's tricky. It's not easy, but we're going to be able to dive into that, see what comes out of that, and how that then impacts our own lives. So join us. We're going to do some little music here and some intro, but then we'll be back. We'll talk to you then. Welcome to Pondering Passages. My friend David Mullins.
I'm right here.
And is here. Curt Austin. And I'm Curt Austin, and we are here to talk this week about Psalm 129. So we're glad that you're here with us, and we're going to just pick up and just go. Anything before we look at the passage, Dave? Anything that, as you read it, you go, that's truth.
When I read it, I thought, I think I'd really like to skip over this one.
Okay, good. It wasn't just me.
It's like, well, I guess we're going to do a show on this. I don't know. We'll get into it. I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah. Open it up. Let's for the benefit of anyone who didn't get a chance to read it this week. It is a song of ascent for the pilgrims, not like pilgrims and Indians from the Mayflower. But for those who are trying to make their way to Jerusalem for the festivals. Yeah. And so this is a psalm for them. Let's so that we don't have to talk about it as much, let's burn time just reading this week. Want to?
I don't know.
I thought, honestly, as I read it this week, I pinned all my hope on the fact that you would have this great insight that would, I really did, because it was like, okay, I don't see this as a rousing, we're on the way to Jerusalem. I didn't see it as one of those. And it's like, how in the world is this a song of ascent?
Well, I see it kind of as a song of recognition, for one. Israel, depending on where this was written or when this was written, probably maybe after the exile, or maybe... they probably wouldn't make the strip during, but after the exile, they're remembering just all the really bad things, that has happened in the history of Israel. Mm-hmm. And here it is: from my earliest youth, my enemies have persecuted me. And you have to think, they were set apart for God's purposes, God's special possession, but yet, all the nations around them persecuted them. Perhaps because they were different.
And if you take, and I was thinking of this in two ways as I read this week. One, it could be read as a personal account. I mean, probably not written that way, but you could say, this is my story, right? I've really had a hard time. But when he says, let all Israel repeat this, then you have to think, no, it's actually like this corporate experience. So, like verse 3, where my back is covered with cuts as if a farmer had plowed long furrows, it's hard to put that into a national position. And it's easier. I have in my head, I don't know if you remember it, there was a picture taken in the 1800s of a slave, African-American slave in the United States. And it was a picture of his back. And it was just horrendous. The scars. And I immediately, when I read verse 3, that's the one that came up. And so I was thinking of that personal image. If that person had the story that this is what I've experienced, but the Lord's good because he cut me free from the ropes.
Yeah. All through the Old Testament, Israel is personified. I mean, God does it. He talks about it. He talks about Israel being like a child. When Israel was a child, I led them out. And so, it really goes with the whole imagery of, we are, and maybe it's hard for us because we're so individualistic in the West, especially in the
mhm.
U.S., they were very much a community. And so they're looking at not just a current community, but one with a vast history.
Yeah.
And so to me, it really looks like they're looking back and saying, from earliest youth, from our very beginning, we have been persecuted, but we've never been defeated. I think that's a huge statement of faith. Here they are, after all of this, marching up to Zion.
Okay. Yeah, you put it in the perspective of that. That's what's happening at the moment. So it's whatever's been in the past is still there.
Yeah.
But as we're going to Zion, then we can say, they may have counted us out, but we were never down.
Right. Yeah.
Or we were down, but they could never count us out.
Yeah. Yeah. And the back is covered with cuts. There's some imagery there. I think the scholars and the commentaries and stuff talk about the different imagery, about the ropes and about the long furrows. But I think it's an image that they probably really identified with, feeling, just over their history, they have these scars as a community. As a community, have scars. But even in the midst of that, the Lord is good. Why? Because we have been cut free over and over again. Over and over again, God has come through for them, and now they are free and they're walking up to Zion. And then we move into why this is a song of ascent, because they all mention Jerusalem or Zion, depending on your translation. And really, this was where God was. This was God's presence.
Right.
And so it represented, and I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this. When they talk about Zion, when they talk about Jerusalem, they're talking about the presence of God. They're talking about almost, I guess, God himself.
Right.
At that point.
Yeah. It's not an idea. It's the manifestation.
Yeah. Oh,
God's
like
holiness.
Yeah. Yeah. And so all who hate God, almost making that connection, be turned back in shameful defeat.
I will say I did really like 6-7, that imagery of grass on the roof.
Yeah.
I thought that's, now if you're building a green, a greenhouse, something that is ecologically friendly, you might do that. And, you'll put the grass on the roof, and it's all set up so that it adds, your insulation. But you can really see in an agricultural society where, you're not growing grass just to decorate. You're growing it to feed your cattle or your sheep or whatever.
Well,
that would be silly.
One of the commentators, this is what I got. Right now, we have like a 2-story house, and the upper story is really high. We don't have a ladder. And I'm looking up there in our gutter, and I see a blade of grass growing up in our gutter.
Yeah.
Well, how to get there? Well, you know what? Birds go up there, and they do their stuff, and all of a sudden there's stuff growing. The commentator talked about grass that just kind of ends up on the roof. I think he didn't say this, but I'm wondering if it's for that same reason. It's useless. The harvester isn't going to harvest that. It's going to be despised by the binder. Who's going to want that? Right. Even though it has grown up there. Maybe I don't know. It could be a tomato plant.
Well, we've got a lot of these maples and what's the other tree that have the whirligigs, and we've got somebody in the neighborhood that they have not taken care of their home at all, and their gutter is absolutely full of sprouted whirligigs have all sprouted, so they've got trees all growing in their gutter. But to the point of this, verse 6, that's not where it's supposed to be growing.
Right. Yeah.
So if you get grass on the roof, it's going to turn yellow. it's not going to grow like you would expect it to. Like if you planted wheat in a field, it's going to grow. It's going to need the nourishment of the ground. But you're going to, the curse on the people who hate Jerusalem or God is that you're not even going to flourish even there. You're not only are you going to be out of place, you're not even going to be able to make it to growth.
Yeah, I like that word that you use, flourish, because we've seen some of the other ones talking about prosperity, and it's like, well, we have to redefine that, because for them, they're not talking about a big house and a fancy car. They're talking about a kind of life. And when you say flourish, that's exactly what I think of. And asking that those who hate Jerusalem have a shameful defeat, that they wouldn't flourish, that they won't be prosperous, that they won't have that harvest where people will say, man, God has blessed you. Look at this harvest. It just won't happen.
Well, and then on top of that, not only are you going to look weak and pasty, you're going to be yellow, half grown, but and they're even calling out, may no one ever bless you, may no one ever even give you the benefit of a doubt.
Well, and that was in connection with not having a harvest, because apparently when there was a harvest, it was a sign of God's blessing. And so people would say, oh, the Lord has blessed you because
I knew
of
you'd have
harvest.
something to share.
Well, there's only a couple of things. In fact, the commentaries were very, very short. This would have been the passage to look at the commentaries, because they at least the ones I looked at is pretty short. But
it's it's part of it's part of the canon of these passages that take them unto Jerusalem. And I can see, it starts out with this kind of a responsive reading, right?
Yeah.
So you say, I say this, you say that. And then you would kind of repeat that. And I guess, I think the other thing we have to remember is that there was probably no love loss for those who did take them captive, for those who, made their lives miserable, who left them with scourged backs.
I forget which prophet it was. For some reason, Habakkuk comes to my mind, that he was wondering how God could actually use a nation like Babylon that was just so pagan as an instrument of discipline for Israel. And God's answer was basically, there will be justice. There will be justice. So they're not getting off scot-free. I'm using them for my purposes, but unless, and I think you see this in Nineveh, where God gave them an opportunity to repent, which they did. Now later, I think they kind of went backwards, but that's kind of what I see here. May all of those who hate Jerusalem, may they experience their own demise or their own defeat because of that. But as we've been talking, and you talked about that call and response, something just kind of fell into place for me. There's a film, I forget if it's Friday Night Lights or something, where they're in the locker room, and I think they were at a low point, and all of a sudden someone starts singing "Ain't No Mountain High Enough." And
it's Remember the Titans.
Oh, really? Okay. And when I think about those first two verses, it's almost like they're saying, think about where we've come from. And we'll say that to one another. I mean, Curt, you and I, we talk about this, and man, just think back to where we were and how we were, and look at what God has done. And I'm starting to see that in this psalm, that I would not have seen it if one hadn't read it for a whole week or talked to my good friend about it.
You were ready to give it up after day one.
Oh man, I read this and was like, really? Grass on a roof? Okay.
I like the grass on the roof thing. It's just something about it, and then the imagery of the lines in the back kept me kept me thinking about this over and over again of what is he trying to say, and what is the story. But again, talking about it really kind of put a whole thing in context, kind of
I think
encapsulated it for me.
saying that God is faithful and down but not out. We weren't defeated even though we went through a tough time. Here we are. We're the ones going up to the temple because God is faithful.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you. Thanks for helping us with this. So folks, if you want to learn more about the Psalms, we'd invite you to go back and watch more of our Pondering Psalms. We've been doing this now for over a year, so we've got quite a few in the can, as they say, and would love to hear your thoughts about about our thoughts. And we've said this multiple times: we are not biblical scholars; we're biblical students. And so become a student along with us, learn a little bit more, and join us in that conversation. Follow us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and leave comments. Let us know, and we'd love to hear from you. So until we talk to you again next time, this is Curt. That's Dave. We'll see you then. So the potato princess, she fell in love with Walter Cronkite. She started dating him, and she came to the potato king, and she said, "Father, I want to marry Walter Cronkite." And he said, "Well, you can't marry Walter Cronkite." She said, "Well, why can't I marry Walter Cronkite?" And he said, "Because he's a commentator." Isn't that great? He's not like a royal tater. He's a commentator. Exactly.
Oh, now I got it.
Yeah, okay. It's a good one.
It's a knee slapper.